This is me, a strong, confident, 4-time American record holder, 12-time NCAA champion, and member of the U.S. national team. Swimming took me around the world, racing in packed arenas alongside Olympians I had once watched on television. I was just months away from my final goal and the opportunity to get on the United States Olympic team. What if I told you that that dream that I had worked towards for over 15 years was stripped away in an instant? That overnight, I went from being the fastest woman to swim those events to not being able to stand long enough to cook a meal, safely take a shower, or remember the names of friends I had known for years. That despite seeing dozens of specialists, healthcare through Team USA, and cash to pay for any promise of recovery, I spent a year without a diagnosis and a treatment plan. In 2020, I moved home, and my mom became my full-time caregiver as she worked at the kitchen table throughout the pandemic. Desperate for answers and to get back in the water, I quickly became an expensive science experiment, trialing anything from questionable supplements to explorations of childhood trauma as the supposed cause of my symptoms. I want you to think of a time when you were more tired than you knew what to do with. Sleep doesn't fix it. Even small tasks send you back to bed. This lasts for months. Your memory is foggy, you're unable to work, and you're sitting at your 20th medical appointment in just a few months. This was me. And when I was lucky enough to get my 10 minutes with a new practitioner, I strategically laid out the timelines and symptoms to explain the way that my body no longer worked the way that it used to. Responses I got? I'm so happy to tell you everything looks normal. Have you considered meditation? Are you sure it's not anxiety? I'm happy to place a referral to psychiatry. Appointment after appointment, the quiet implication that if nothing showed up on a test, nothing must really be wrong. I found myself crying in the car in the parking lot once again, feeling stuck as the rest of the world kept going. I didn't fall through the cracks because nobody cared. I fell through because the healthcare system wasn't designed for conditions like mine. I share this surreal experience because though this may not be your story, statistically it will be someone you love. And when it is, the medical system does not often know what to do next. My diagnosis came with sheer luck. I called a family friend, she recognized my symptoms from her daughters, and recommended a pediatrician that cares so deeply for patients like me. He sees adults after 5 p.m. and on the weekends. I was diagnosed with myalgic encephalomyelitis, chronic fatigue syndrome, and postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, likely triggered by mono and COVID. Yes, my diagnosis has more letters than treatment options. And alongside the utter relief of someone finally acknowledging my suffering was the devastating realization that there was no cure, no clear treatment plan, and this could affect me for years, if not the rest of my life. Millions of people worldwide suffer from similar, invisible, debilitating illness. More than a quarter of them are unable to work, unable to stay in school because of their illness, and many of them are struggling through healthcare systems that never fully take responsibility. These conditions fall under a group called infection-associated chronic conditions. They include long COVID, chronic Lyme disease, dysautonomia, many more you've never heard of and hopefully never will. The healthcare system fails patients like us in predictable ways. First is the lack of awareness. Not because these conditions are rare, but because they have historically been underfunded. That underinvestment has created a vicious cycle. Limited research leads to limited evidence, which leads to limited treatment options, which reinforces skepticism. And skepticism further suppresses funding. The absence of data has become the justification for continued inaction. Now, lack of awareness explains why we don't have answers, but the second failure explains why we don't have time to look for them. Modern healthcare is built around efficiency, short visits, high volume, productivity metrics that reward how many patients are seen, not how well they are understood. Complex symptoms take time to understand. They require listening, pattern recognition across visits, and tolerance for uncertainty. You may be surprised to know that these illnesses are not new. But because they primarily affect women, are invisible and fluctuating, they have historically been attributed to hysteria or simply dismissed. Uncertainty in our healthcare system is treated as an inefficiency, passed to patients as disbelief. My most painful accusation came from someone I had known for years. They suggested that my symptoms were merely Olympic nerves, that I was stepping back, not because I was sick, but because I was too afraid to risk failing. They had seen me compete at world championships with a mono infection, break American records with the stomach flu. But when I was struggling with something that they couldn't see and I didn't have the data to prove, it must have been all in my head. When uncertainty leads to dismissal, it leads to the third failure, fragmentation. Patients like me often bounce from cardiology, neurology, rheumatology, psychiatry, primary care, and more, all looking at one slice of the problem. When ownership is unclear, patients become the coordinators, tracking their symptoms, connecting the dots, and retelling their story in 10-minute windows. We spend enormous resources repeatedly telling patients that nothing is wrong. And the cost of these failures is layered on top of the illness itself. Long COVID alone has cost over $1 trillion in lost productivity. Patients with these illnesses rarely die from their conditions, but their lives are often taken from them. If this were someone you loved, would you accept these outcomes as inevitable? Or would you demand different systems? Systems that train clinicians to sit with the uncertainty, that incentivize time for complex cases, and fund interdisciplinary care instead of forcing fragmentation. I decided that I could sit back and wait for these systems, or I could help build them. So I decided to become a doctor. with the goal of becoming the physician that me and millions of patients are waiting for. I'm also pursuing an MBA to learn the tools that I need to help design the systems that we desperately need. Additionally, I started Dysunderstood, an organization that provides education by amplifying patient voices and building community for those navigating misunderstood illness while healthcare learns to care for them. Standing here tonight took much more than most of you will ever know. I may never stand on an Olympic podium, but I do hope to create the gold standard for how these illnesses are treated. Patient is a powerful word. It holds a double meaning: to wait, for research, for answers, and for someone to believe you. But illness doesn't wait, and neither should progress. Progress begins when we decide that patients are worth the uncertainty, and medicine will move forward because of those that are willing to care before certainty arrives. Thank you.